Hello everyone, I'm Mauro Colarieti and today we're gonna discuss a framework I created to analyze queer inclusivity in contemporary video games. I called it Create Infiltrate. I'm mainly a storyteller, so I write novels, short stories, and I earned my PhD in learning sciences and digital technologies, where I mostly analyze the minority embodiment, which is a phenomenon that appears in story-driven games with branching narratives. And I mainly focused also on the inclusion of minorities in these digital spaces. And I'm also part of the committee of Ardin and Digra. So I play and study games a lot. I focus on inclusivity renaissance too, which is a trend that has been happening in the third millennium that mirrors similar shifts in film, television, and literature. And it's about the growing inclusion of BIPOC, LGBTQI+, and other marginalized identities in the game world. My main question here is whether it is a progressive and natural mirroring of society that is becoming more and more inclusive, or is more of a capitalistic approach to create and appeal to a broader, more diverse audiences. The research question when it comes to the framework itself are how does queerness emerge within digital spaces? Can we recognize any patterns of queer representation in contemporary video games? And if so, which are they? Can we create classes based on these patterns? And are queer digital spaces defined only by intentional representation? Or are they produced mostly through ongoing interaction between players, systems, and cultural practices like mods? When it comes to the literature, we focus on the queer worldmaking by Muñoz, heterotopia by Foucault, and queer failure by 𝗔𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗿. The focus was to, you know, translate certain theories from philosophy, for example, into game studies. So I wanted to focus on how video games world building practices can represent queer identities and storylines and how they create communities. Muñoz with queer world making focuses on the concept of queerness as perpetually becoming, so it's not something fixated. And the world making, in this case, it's an alternative way of inhabiting a world. And the concept of queer possibility shifts the focus away from static representation and toward processes of becoming through experimentation and collective belonging, which works very well with the concept of gaming because of technology always evolving and even game practices are constantly evolving. The goal is to approach queer digital spaces in the contemporary era as contingent moments where alternative forms of society become imaginable and livable. Heterotopia, in the same way, focuses on all spaces that are other, sites which simultaneously mirror and invert the world around them. They are worlds within worlds, which somehow disturb or unsettle what lies outside of them. Foucault also focused on the concept of the mirror. So in the mirror, you see yourself in a place where you are not, is a reflection. So it's an unreal virtual space that opens up behind the surface, but it's still you. So I really wanted to use this theory as a part of the framework because the heterotopia itself is about queerness and living queerness in digital spaces. And finally, Queer Failure by 𝗔𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗿 focuses on the concept that not all queer representation is explicit or intentional, and that queer failure can be a productive form of resistance against societal norms that prioritize profit, heteronormative, and conventional success, and a way to subtly treat queer themes on tropes for the heteronormative user's audience. A few examples she made were mainly for Pixar movies like Monsters, so even the concept of monstrosity as otherness. So in this case, the goal was to focus less on bad representation, for example, tokenism, and more on the classification of these phenomena in my framework. So to translate these philosophical and societal theories into game studies, queer making mainly focuses on in-game and user-created queer characters. Heterotopia is mainly for queer lobbies, servers, and storylines. And queer failure starts from the bottom. So it's how fan practices developed a stronger inclusivity of queerness in certain games with mods. The framework itself mainly exposes the queer presence in contemporary video games, and it can happen through creation of new spaces or infiltration in spaces that are already existing. So for the creation of new spaces, it can be either accidental or intentional, and it can lead to an upgrade or a recess, while infiltration can be queer framed or passive. So with queer framed, we focus on queer characters being articulated, narrated, and highlighted in the game, mostly with queer topics happening in the plot, while passive infiltration is when visual or symbolic elements are included and they signal queerness without altering underlying systems or plots. So just to make everything a bit more clear, I'm gonna add some case studies for each category. The first case study I want to discuss is The Sims. So it would be a creation of a new space, but accidental. So The Sims, as we all know, I hope, is a life simulator game. So you create your own family, you make them live, they live their life based uh, on your use of the game. So it has been a sort of locus of queer history in the past. It's one of those games where it has been studied for many years because there's a connection between the player and the game itself. So there is this study in 2006, for example, where there are people that play the game. They projected part of their own personality, identity, and life into the Sims characters. So digital spaces like the Sims have much lower risks than physical spaces when it comes to exploring sexuality, for example. There are many articles about nostalgic journalists talking about how the Sims really shaped them into their queer self. And it wasn't always the case. And that's because The Sims was mainly a distraction from SimCity 2000. And it was mostly a side project that nobody really had hope for. There was also an accident in 1996. In Copter X, for example, a game designer included a gay Easter egg that got him fired, creating a speculation that Maxis was indeed a homophobic company. Rewrite, which is the creator of The Sims, debated whether to include same-sex relationships in The Sims gameplay, and Maxis eventually decided to avoid criticism from politicians and gamers by refusing to include LGBTQAI plus interactions in The Sims code. That's until the case that changed video games forever happened. So during the Electronic Entertainment Expo of 1999, Patrick J. Barrett, which was the programmer who added same-sex romantic interaction to the Sims code, pretty much forgot to delete a certain code that made some of the Sims bisexual. And during a gameplay demonstration of the Sims during a wedding, two female Sim guests started interacting with each other and shared a kiss spontaneously. And everything changed. It got a lot of interaction from journalists and investors. They were super interested because it was something new, something bold, and something courageous. And also, these expanded to the modding community. So what happened in the next 20 years, pretty much 25 years, is that it created a sort of digital dollhouse where people could explore their sexuality and their identities, even when they weren't heteronormative. And this created one of the most queer-coded games ever made, probably. And the modding community has always been strong in making it even more inclusive. So for the other accidental case, I'd like to discuss Dead by Daylight. So it would be a creation of new space, but still accidental because the queer inclusion wasn't the main selling point at the beginning of the creation of the game. So Dead by Daylight is a horror asymmetrical game. So you have 5 players, 4 are survivors that have to escape from one killer. There's a strong LGBTQAI plus fan base, and the studio has guaranteed, for example, Pride Flag cosmetics as free permanent add-ons and integrated queer characters such as David King and Orella Rose into the official lore. They signal explicit welcome, normalize queer presence, and cultivate expectation within the community regarding inclusivity in the new media horror landscape. But the question remains, why is DBD so queer? What makes this horror game so interesting and played by queer people? And I'm gonna play a clip by Trixie Mattel during a live Twitch where she was playing Friday the 13th, which kind of had the same asymmetrical aspect to the game. And then we're gonna discuss a bit more.
I don't know why. I seem to only run into gay people on this game.
How do you know I'm gay?
Not that it's a problem. No. Come on. I didn't say you were gay.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not just gay, I'm also educated. You know, there's so many facets to me.
That's awesome. But I mean, is this like a gay people game?
I think gay people, they like scary games. I think that's what it is.
Oh.
Gay people, I think they like horror because I think gay people like the fantasy and like the heightened spookiness of it. Gay people have a lot of emotional baggage, and so gay people need things like this to kind of like blow off steam. I think that's what it
Oh,
is.
that makes sense.
But I don't know
Thank
because I'm
you.
not gay, so I don't know.
Oh.
So, from this point of view, horror and queerness have been studied for their intersectionality, but mainly in cinema and TV. Monstrosity as the otherness, social rejection, monsters as metaphors of queerness, and all these other concepts that really relate to the queer failure that we discussed earlier. Furthermore, in Dead by Daylight, there's a statistical dominance of female survivor characters, as tracked by community analytics sites such as Nightlight. Survivor selection function as aesthetic and identity expression. The popularity of feminine avatars further contributes to the welcoming anti-incel atmosphere of the game. And one aspect that I think is interesting to treat is the fact that there is no voice chat in game, so there is not the possibility of homophobic or sexist harassment, and that's probably one of the reasons why this game is played a lot by queer people. When it comes to the intentional creation of queer spaces in games, in video games, Mediterranean Inferno comes to mind. It's an indie Italian game that won the 2024 Excellence in Narrative Award at the IGF. So the plot is three gay friends spending the summer in southern Italy and fighting with their inner demons. It's a transposition of our cinema. The game is drawn and written by the same author, both in the narrative. So the highs and lows of queer friendship, the mental health during COVID-19 quarantine, the concept of internet fame, but also the aesthetics. So there's a lot of Baroccan camp influences. It's very surreal. It's very explicit. It's a game that is intentionally queer. So a few examples here. It's a game that really plays on what it means to be a gay person in the third millennium. The other case study I would like to bring for intentional creation of queer spaces in gaming is Dream Daddy, but also coming out on top from 2014. So these games are a twist of the dating simulator because they're mostly aimed towards queer players. So it's a dating simulator with only gay romanceable characters. So when it comes to an upgrade of accidental creation of queer spaces in gaming, Paralives is a great example. It's very contemporary. It got released probably like 15 days ago in early access, and it already has in-game queer characters. And the life simulator is upgrading the Sims because even the creation of a character is way more inclusive than the Sims base game. So you have pronouns, queer identities, sexualities, the possibility of polyamory. While when I think about a recession of accidental creation is Inzoi. Inzoi was considered the Sims main competitor until Paralives hit off, and the base game didn't include same-sex romantic interactions like the Sims pre-release version in the 2000s. So it seems like, and I mean, it got very criticized for that. So the life simulators without queerness are just not well received by the audience, and the reason why is probably because in a world that is incredibly scripted and dystopian, maybe playing God in a sandbox is the only place we feel free. As we discussed with The Sims, many people analyze their identity and discover themselves through gaming. So having these queer spaces is mandatory for certain genres of gaming, like life simulators. So discussing the infiltration of other spaces, the concept came from certain genres of gaming that has been anti-queer for decades. And with queer framed, as we said before, we're discussing voluntarily including queer storylines in the game itself. So Detroit Become Human is one of these examples. So it's a narrative science fiction game centered on android oppression, social hierarchy, and discrimination. And it includes in one of the chapters the relationship between the Tracy androids. So the Tracy androids are a type of androids that are mainly for sex work. And these are two female presenting sex worker androids who are in love with each other. The relationship functions as part of the game's wider critique of exploitation, control, and systemic violence. Queerness is intertwined within the game political and ethical question rather than existing as isolated representation, and is an example of queer narratives operating inside a broader story about marginalization and social exclusion. The other example is, of course, The Last of Us, is a post-apocalyptic action-adventure franchise. Queerness is integrated directly into the narrative rather than existing only as an optional representation. Part 1 includes Bill's relationship with Frank, while the Left Behind DLC centers Ellie's romantic relationship with Riley. Part 2 further expands queer storytelling through Ellie and Dina relationship. And having a mainstream AAA title where queer identities are narratively central while existing within a broader commercial framework is revolutionary. So when it comes to passive representation, we're talking about characters that are not highlighted because of their queerness. So Last Stop is placed in contemporary London, is a narrative supernatural adventure. It includes a gay couple within its broader ensemble of cast, so it's Emma and Aisling. And the relationship exists within the world of the game, but is not heavily foregrounded or treated as a central narrative conflict. Queerness appears as part of the social environment rather than as the primary focus of the story. In the same way, Hogwarts Legacy is an open-world action RPG set in the Wizarding world. It includes Sirona Ryan, which is the franchise's first explicitly transgender character, owner of the Free Broomstick in Hogsmeade. The game also introduces more flexible characters customization, allowing players to combine gender representation, voice, and appearance beyond traditional binary restrictions. Queer presence exists within the world of the game, but does not reorganize its narrative or systemic structures. We could say it's almost subtle. Inclusivity functions primarily through visibility and character design rather than through queer-centered storytelling. So, as my final thoughts, I'd like to discuss, particularly the concept of passive inclusion. So the challenges of inclusion of queerness without meaningful narrative or gameplay function has risk but also benefits. The main risk are that stories that has been centered on marginalized identities were largely excluded from gaming for decades and deserve greater visibility and recognition in this inclusivity renaissance. While at the same time, there's the possibility of identity tourism, which is a concept that Nakamura created in 1995, and is the privileged position of temporarily inhabiting a virtual marginalized identity and leaving it behind at will whenever it gets too much or is just boring. And the potential benefit, though, is that everyone deserves to feel represented and included without being reduced to their identity, without being objectified for it. So, in general, I feel like we're very lucky to discuss these concepts. I think this is a historical period that is very interesting when it comes to this discussion because it's like we have two school of thoughts, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts. So, this is all from me. Thank you so much. My name is Mauro Colarieti, and this was Create Infiltrate, a framework for queer inclusivity in contemporary video games.